Hello, and welcome to another episode of TacoBytes, your daily bite of Degen, episode number 465. We are live with John Deaton.
Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, GM. You are known as the myth, the man, the legend to the XRP community as a huge voice for the little guy in standing up not only against the SEC, but just sort of like in the policies of blockchain adoption. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the kind words. The XRP community has been fantastic and supportive of all my efforts. And so any recognition that I've received, I owe a lot to them.
Yeah. And now you're taking up a case with, or potentially taking up on behalf of the Kraken community as well.
Yeah, well, also we submitted, we have a form for Coinbase. If Coinbase loses their motion to dismiss, I haven't checked recently, but we're over 5,000 Coinbase customers who will potentially be amicus and file an amicus brief. I'm hopeful that the Coinbase motion to dismiss will be granted, at least in part. And so that could be a very huge victory for the crypto market. Normally, in a motion to dismiss, you have less than a 10% chance of success, but I put this up there in the 40 to 50% chance. And so it'll be very interesting to see. But also just recently, everyone knows the SEC sued Kraken. And so I submitted a form for people to join. I believe that was just a couple weeks ago. I believe we're over 1,000 people who've signed up for that. So the purpose of that is to not let the SEC gaslight the court that they're speaking on behalf of retail individual investors. You know, according to the SEC, they sued Coinbase, Ripple, Library, Dragon Chain, and everybody else they've sued to protect you and me. And we're saying we don't want the SEC to speak for us. I don't want Kraken to speak for us. I don't want Coinbase to speak for us. I made it clear that Ripple didn't speak for us, that we want our own voices heard. And so it's just an opportunity to make sure that the court is aware of our perspective as customers, individual investors. And so that's the whole purpose of it.
Yeah. And so this is going to be, you're saying amicus. I've always called it an amicus. Am I completely off on that?
Well, it's amicus. Amicus curiae is technically, I believe, the way it's pronounced, but in different parts of the world, they pronounce all these legal terms differently. You go to Texas, when you ask questions of the jury, it's called voir dire. In New England, it's called voir dire. So it's all good.
Because like with the Coinbase piece, not only was your piece on behalf of it, there was the 6 attorneys that were SEC experts, you know, for security experts that filed their amicus brief as well on behalf of Coinbase, where they took 26 pages in a clear linear fashion, breaking down the Howey test to come out with 1 2-sentence, this is not a security. They are not, you know, they do not meet the Howey test. And I'm like, for me, that was one of the best legal papers I've seen in a while, arguments, just because of how methodical they went with it. And we're seeing a lot more people start to say no to the SEC, and it's like they've had so many black eyes this year. They've gotten like 1 cash cow from Kraken that they're like, we're going to go back for more.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I know what you're talking about. That was these these 6 experts, they're law professors, they're esteemed securities law experts. And that's the whole thing. Is basically even Gary Gensler, when he testified before Congress at his confirmation hearing to be SEC chair, and that moment is probably the only time Gary Gensler has been honest, in my opinion. And he admitted that there was this regulatory gap. And it's interesting that he used that term because that was a term used in the Hinman emails that were disclosed in the Ripple case, where the senior counsel for the SEC, basically the SEC's Office of General Counsel, they emailed admitting that crypto fell in, quote, a regulatory gap. So Gensler, when he's testifying, basically says, look, crypto exchanges, Coinbase, Kraken, they really fall outside of the SEC's purview, outside of the CFTC, because the Howey test was never, ever, and this is one thing I'm very proud about, in my amicus brief that I filed on behalf of XRP holders, I challenged the SEC to the court and said, I challenge them to find a single case in history where a secondary sale of the investment contract, even if it was an investment contract the first time it was sold, that the secondary sale was also deemed a security. And there isn't a single case in history. And of course, the SEC couldn't accept my challenge. They didn't cite anything. And the only case in history that ever dealt with the issue, it was a condominium sale, and the Court of Appeals held that the secondary sale was not a security, even though the first sale may have been. And so, Howey it was never meant to address just because the first time you sell something, and your audience knows that any asset, any commodity could be marketed, packaged, and sold as an investment contract. Chinchillas have been used, beavers have been used, gold has been used, even Bitcoin in 2013 was used in an investment contract. So anybody can do that. So even if Ripple sold XRP as an investment contract in the early years, that doesn't mean that when I go on Coinbase and buy it, that it's also a security. And that's clear. But obviously Gensler, he goes into the SEC, he joins Elizabeth Warren in the anti-crypto army and movement, and then everything under the sun, including Pokemon cards and baseball cards and Cabbage Patch dolls or anything else you could think of is now a security, according to him.
Yeah, no, okay, so there's a lot I want to break through that. One, when we see, for a quick rundown of the Howey test, for those that don't know, basically it has 4 prongs, and correct me if I miss any of these, but that it's an investment where the buyer just pays money and doesn't expect to do anything, but they expect a return through no work of their own. And that's the short and dirty of a Howey test, right?
Yeah, it's technically an investment in a common enterprise with a reasonable expectation of profits solely on the efforts of others. That's the actual test. It's been broken down. Some people say 3 prongs, some people say 4, but the third prong has a 2-part test. That's why people ultimately say 4. And since the Howey case in 1946, the word solely, even though Supreme Court's never readdressed it, the lower court said, well, they watered down the solely part of it and said, well, if it was substantial efforts of others or the majority efforts of others. But what you said is very important, which is the whole part of the Howey test was when someone gives you some money and then they sit back, they don't do a damn thing, they never collect or possess the asset, They just sit back, and in the mail every quarter or twice a year, they receive a check of the pro rata share of the common enterprise. And then Howie, it was orange grove, so it's just tracts of land. And the purchasers, they never took possession of the land. They never harvested the oranges. They never did any of the maintenance. They never picked the oranges. They never sold them.
They never talked about how good the oranges were.
Right. And Howie never said the oranges themselves were obviously securities. It was the totality of circumstances. There was a land contract signed by the investor and a service contract authorizing Howie Maintenance to do all the work. And so obviously with crypto, we possess the asset. Unlike in the Howie case, we take control of it. We can stake it, and we can get a financial benefit independent of whoever we bought it from, right? From third parties as well. And when you look at Howie, the efforts of others prong was always primarily directed at the promoter. Of course, the SEC wants to say the efforts of others could be anybody, right? Even it could be unrelated people, but crypto. What Gary Gensler has done is basically said, look, the oranges are now the securities, and that's very dangerous because imagine that Howie sells the oranges to a grocer, Kroger, Stop and Shop, Shaw's, whatever you shop at. And then now the grocer sells it to the consumer. Well, the grocer is sort of like the exchange. Think of Coinbase as like a grocer. And so they're saying the oranges were securities no matter who sells them. And there's no case in history where there's no privity. When I say privity, I mean some kind of business relationship. So when you go on Coinbase and you buy XRP or ETH or anything else, you don't know who you're buying it from. You're just buying it. And you have no relationship. So in the Ripple case, XRP holders were buying XRP, and in London and Japan and Switzerland and Singapore and the United Arab Emirates, XRP was deemed not a security. Their regulatory body said XRP is not a security. The United Kingdom said, Financial Conduct Authority said, hey, XRP is a hybrid token. It acts like a utility token and an exchange token. And so, but it's not a security token. But the SEC was basically saying, and those people were buying XRP who never heard of a company called Ripple. They may have heard of Ripple, the name, because Ripple and XRP was used interchangeably for a long time. But they didn't know that Ripple was this software company that sold software to banks. And so how can you be in a common enterprise with a company that you don't know exists, right? It's just take it from a common sense perspective. In order to enter a common enterprise, you would think you would know who the common enterprise is. And so the SEC in the Ripple case, what they did is they didn't limit it to just when Ripple sold XRP. They said all XRP, no matter who sells it, were securities. And I'm very proud of what we did because in the writ of mandamus I filed, the SEC admitted right off the bat that just because they say something's a security doesn't mean it is. It's only when the court agrees with the SEC. And so, yes, and no one can say that XRP holders didn't make a difference because the judge cited the affidavits that I submitted on behalf of XRP holders. And she also cited the work that we did in the library case, where the judge agreed on the record that his ruling only applied to library. It didn't apply to the secondary market. And Judge Torres in the Ripple case cited both those things in her opinion. And that's proof positive that individual holders actually did make a difference in the case.
So one of the things that, two pieces on that. One, my thought on this, and tell me if this has been talked about or thought about, or if I'm just, picking out the smallest thing on the Howey test breakdown, solely on the act of others. Do let's just say shit coins and every other project that you jump in their Telegram, the first thing they say, go pump this out on all your socials.
Right.
And so I might have however many followers and I'm promoting it too. I've bought into it and I'm promoting it by everyone sort of doing that. Is that an argument against, does that help it defeat the Howey test? Is that a case?
Well, it all depends if the SEC could prove that a promoter was paying people to shill the tokens and was like paying influencers, hey, you shill this token and we have other people shilling the token and the price is going to go up and people are going to make money. You could, if you have that kind of proof, then the SEC could make a case, but the question is, once a promoter sort of just puts it out there, like in the Ripple case, the SEC didn't have, all they did is they cited an email that a tweet that Chris Larson tweeted out in 2014, and there's no proof that people even saw that tweet. There was a brochure sent by Ripple to 100 potential investors, but the SEC wasn't claiming that those 100 investors bought a security. They were claiming because Ripple did that all XRP were securities, but there was no proof that you or I or anyone else ever knew of those brochures. We never received those brochures. And so, it all comes down to evidence and proof. Yeah. And so if there was proof that these promoters were shilling the token and paying people to shill it, then you could make a case. And so, what people don't like, the one thing that Gary Gensler is right about is that the Howey test is a fact-specific test, and it's a case-by-case basis. And there's no doubt that there have been tokens issued that violated the law. I mean, the ETH ICO violated the Howey test. I mean, the ICO itself, doesn't mean ETH is a security today sold on exchanges throughout the world, but that specific ICO was. And so, but most tokens, I couldn't tell you because I don't know enough about it. But but there's certainly been many cases of pumps and dumps that would violate the U.S. securities laws.
And so when I like shill, I'm not necessarily saying paid. You go join any Telegram group for a new token, they'll say, go push this out. And so it's like, me as a holder, I just bought this. I want other people to know about it. So I'm going to tweet that out, or I'm going to put that out on my socials. But, so Torres found ruling with that XRP, the way it was sold to the community, was not a security violation. The way Garlinghouse and everyone and the other co-founders sold privately was not a security, but the way they sold to investors, that could move forward.
Yeah, basically in the case where Ripple had written contracts with institutional sales, so hedge funds, in other words, let's say that Ripple had gave an option contract to an investor, and I'm just making a hypothetical up. Let's say that investor said, here's $20 million to an investment in Ripple. And Ripple said, okay, you can have 10 million XRP valued at 6 cents, right? And then of course XRP goes to $2. He makes a lot of money. And she said that kind of specific transaction was met the Howey test because A, there was a contract, B, there was money exchanged, C, they held it and they were relying on Ripple to build out the ecosystem more, to generate utility for XRP, and then they would expect a profit. And so she said on Ripple's efforts, and they were relying on Ripple because they had a contract with Ripple. She said that specific scenario met the Howey test. When Ripple or Brad Garlinghouse go on Coinbase or Kraken or any other exchange and they sell it, the buyer does not know that it's Brad Garlinghouse selling it. The buyer does not know that it's Ripple selling it. It's a blind bid ask scenario. So the judge simply said, how can you rely on the efforts of someone you don't know you're buying it from? And so that there was no promises or inducements in a blind bid transaction. And so what she did was said, I don't even have to get to the investment prong of Howey or the common enterprise prong of Howey. That third factor that says expect profits on the efforts of others, that was not satisfied in an exchange transaction. And so that's why Coinbase and the industry, celebrated it, because there's an argument there. And that's what I meant by that Coinbase decision that we talked about early on.
Yeah.
Where it's possible a judge, and this is Judge Failure in the Southern District of New York and Coinbase, it's possible that she could say, look, Howey doesn't apply to a secondary transaction when there's a blind bid ask scenario. It just factually can't apply. So therefore, Howey doesn't apply, and grant the motion to dismiss in part on those reasons. And so we'll see that there's an oral argument on January 17th in that case for that motion.
All right. Yeah. So what got you into crypto? When did you get into crypto?
I came across Bitcoin in 2000, very much like a lot of people in 2016, late 2016. I came across Bitcoin. I don't know exactly how I came across it. It could be on YouTube or reading. And I wasn't even on Twitter at the time. And so I decided to read the Bitcoin white paper. I read it. And to be honest with you, I thought of my mom, and I know it sounds corny, but I grew up on welfare and food stamps, a single mother, and living in one of the worst neighborhoods in the country in this small section of Detroit. My mother didn't have a bank account until she was in her 40s. The welfare check would come in the mail along with food stamps. And we needed so much money. We were so poor. She couldn't keep a minimum balance of even $10 in a checking account or savings account. So she would go to the check cashing places. You ever see check cashing places in the hood, right?
Yep.
She would go there and they would charge her 10 to 15%. She'd cash the check, pay the fee. We go to the grocery store, pay bills. And I remember my mom, like, days of, is the mailman going to bring the check that day or is it going to be the next day? And my mom, like, stressed out about it because we needed food and we were that poor. And so I just thought about, wow, like, you don't need a bank, and this instant transfer. You just need this thing right here, this smartphone. That's all you need, and the internet. What an amazing concept. You don't have to pay 10, 15%. You don't need Western Union or MoneyGram or a bank. And that's how I went down the rabbit hole. And I was like, oh my God, this could spread capitalism. Like, you could be a woman in Nigeria. You could create a website, have a smartphone, make hats, sell them across the world and get Bitcoin. Like, that was the concept. And so I went down the proverbial Bitcoin rabbit hole. It's a revolution. It's amazing. Satoshi Nakamoto is the greatest thing ever, right? All that stuff. And then, that got me into, then I learned about ETH and learned about XRP. And I said, whoa, XRP is like 3 to 5 seconds. Holy shit. Like I don't have to wait 10 minutes. I don't have to wait. So then I was like, wow, XRP is a better version of Bitcoin because for payments, right? For payments. And then I ended up by the end of 2017, I owned predominantly Bitcoin. And then ETH was my second largest holding, and then XRP. And what's funny, man, is that, I've been, and I'm not, I'm proud of it. So I don't want anyone to misunderstand the statement, but I was labeled the XRP attorney, right? And people thought I was being paid by Ripple and all this nonsense. When I sued the SEC, I had 10 times more in Bitcoin than I did XRP. I had 3 times more in ETH than I did XRP. I was just genuinely offended that my government was doing what it was doing. And so that's how I got into it. And I know it's corny, but it really hit me at home because, you're 7 years old and your mom is like in tears, hoping that the mailman brings the check. And when he doesn't, and it's going to be the next day, watching her stress out, what we're going to eat that night because she was expecting, either the food stamps or the welfare check. It's not very fun to watch your mother have that kind of anxiety. And so that's how I fell in love, so to speak, with this whole ecosystem. It's not necessarily turned out the way I had hoped, right? Because obviously VCs and obviously the pump and dumps, and whenever there's a new technology, there's going to be fraudsters and there's going to be scammers and all of that. But at its core, that's why I got involved.
And I know you probably saw the prey. I know I was I was one of the prey and saw it too within that ecosystem of the check cashing places. Oh, your check's going to be late. We can front you.
Oh yeah.
$200.
Yep.
And in a week you're going to owe $300. And you're like, well, I need to put food on the table now. So that's
right. Yeah.
And then you get into that perpetual circle.
You're 100% right. You're 100% right, man. A lot of people, and there's so many people out there that don't get it, right? They're so judgmental. They'll say, how the hell could you be so stupid to fall for a payday loan, right? They're called payday loans, right?
Yep.
Well, when you got kids they feed and you literally, your cupboards are bare and you've got to wait 4 days for your check, you're gonna it's like a legitimate loan shark you're going to, and they're saying, okay, here's a $200 front on your $400 check. And of course you end up losing, $100 in the process, but your immediate need is overriding your financial judgment. You don't have a decision. Your decision is to feed your kids or to pay the rent. If you're facing an eviction, that's why you would do it. Yeah. And so I just want people out there that lose the judgment where you're, where you say, how could you deserve to lose your money if you're that stupid to do that? Some people don't have a choice, man.
Yeah. The classic saying, don't judge other people's bags,
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I've never understood, I understand it, but the one thing that I've tried to fight against is the tribalism, are there shit coins out there? Of course there's shit coins out there, right? And if some people think XRP is a shit coin, fine. Like, I'm not going to argue with it. You have your right to your opinion. But I remember when Ripple got sued and XRP obviously, dropped 75% or whatever. I remember people out there, and it got me offended. I wanted to really kick them in their face, to be honest with you. That's how mad I would get. Would be, well, if you're stupid enough to buy shit coin like XRP, if you're dumb enough to be Brad Garlinghouse's exit liquidity, then you deserve to get wiped out. And I would just think, do you ever think about the things you say? Like, here's a human being. just because they may have made a mistake and was on too much leverage or whatever, it doesn't mean they deserve to get wiped out. Doesn't mean they deserve to start thinking about suicide because they lost their life savings, right? We all make mistakes, and I just wish people would be I want everybody to get paid, man. Like, life's tough and we got bills to pay and we want to provide for our family. So, like, I want us to get to a point where we can celebrate other people's success and wealth and not hate on each other.
That seems to be where like a lot of the growth hack is drama and hate on other people, especially in social media. And that seems to drive conversations. And you're like, why would I want to be part of any community where it's built on tearing it down someone? And that was me. That, like, for me, for those that have been on the show for a minute, or followed this, they've heard my story a little bit. But for me, the white paper was a mathematical proof to do good. It didn't matter how many or how big or strong the bad actors were, or, as long as there was plus one good actor, it would benefit the entire ecosystem. Everyone would benefit. And, that's sort of where I was trying to, at that point in my life, was trying to change things around. And I was running a sports book. That's what got me into Bitcoin, and people were like, oh yeah, I'll give you cash and you can give me Bitcoin. And I'm like, I'm mining this. Heck yeah. I had taken over a computer lab and I was doing, after hours mining, CPU mining back in the day. So I was like, yeah, okay, let's do this.
When you can mine Bitcoin on a laptop.
Computers. So like we didn't have access to, I didn't have a laptop then, but I had a computer lab. So like old Windows computers and stuff like that, and using Go hash. And so it was, I'm like, okay, cool. But there was different points where different things came out. And I think one of my biggest misses was Dogecoin, because it was made as a shit coin to make fun of things. And so we gave it away to each other.
Right.
We just gave it, like, we got it and we gave it away, and my running joke, I guess you could say, it's a joke, but it's true, is I gave someone $1 million Doge because they made a funny joke, a funny meme that made that. And I'm like, at that time, it was like $3, Right. And but it had been given to me, so we just passed it back and forth. And I was like, I paid this guy $750,000 to make me laugh. It was worth it,
Yeah, it's funny. It reminds me of the guy who's like, no, it doesn't bother me that I gave 20,000 Bitcoin for pizza.
Yeah, exactly. At the time, it did what he did and what he wanted. And so, but you're more than just that, and so I think we see the whole system growing, and we're starting to see on-chain credit and new infrastructure pieces coming into play. What's some of the cool infrastructure that you see coming out?
Well, I mean, listen, I think that we're going to see, and really, unfortunately, in the United States, it's been held back because of this absolute lack of clarity. But I think we're going to see, here's the question. Brad Garlinghouse is famous for saying 99% of crypto is going to go to zero. And when there's 20,000 tokens, well, okay, well, that still leaves 200 survivors if 99%. So I do believe that there's going to be more than one winner. I've never understood the Bitcoin maxi position of where there can only be one chain and there can only be Bitcoin can be the only survivor. I certainly don't think there's going to be thousands and thousands of blockchains. I remember I ended up buying the top three: Bitcoin, ETH, and XRP. I came across an article in 2000 from Sigam Bank, and they were like, "Listen, uh, the three best plays in crypto are Bitcoin as a store of value, digital gold thesis, Ethereum as an infrastructure play of Web3 and whatnot, and XRP for payments." And I know there's others, there's Quant, and there's other, XDC and all these other payment tokens, but I still believe that thesis holds true. And certainly Ethereum was given, and I'm someone who's helped expose the regulatory advantage that Ethereum was given by the Hinman speech and all of that. And you can never underestimate that advantage that had. It was such an advantage that Joe Lubin was out there saying that Ethereum was the only game in town because you couldn't build on the Bitcoin, blockchain, smart contracts and whatnot that you could on Ethereum. And since Ethereum was the only one that was blessed, that smart contract protocol, that they were the only game in town, and that was true. And that's where all the developers went and whatnot. But now you're seeing, even on the XRP ledger, smart contracts are coming, hooks are coming, and you're seeing a lot more development. And so, but if you ask me, when people ask me about tokens, I still go back to that Sigam article that said those are the top three plays to make. And so that's where the majority of my investments in.
Do you see a future in stable coins where on these different chains that are starting to come out? Like we have Circle with USDC, we have USDT, and Tron.
I think if you look at USDT, and I know that Tether has been like a huge controversy for years, right? And I think that a lot of the criticisms, let's say Tether, were legitimate 5-6 years ago. Just like if you look at Binance in 2019 versus Binance today, it's different. If you look at Kraken in the early days versus today, their AML, their KYC, all that things are much better and improved today than they were back then. And so I do think that I'm someone who, a lot of people believe Tether is the next implosion in crypto. And I think that they probably have filled, I'm guessing, but that they have filled the gaps that existed before. And I think if you look at Circle, you see that just yesterday, SBI out of Japan entered a deal with Circle where they're going to use USDC. And so I think stable coins are better money, and they're certainly, what you can do with cross-border payments with XRP, for example, or USDC, it's incredible. And I think that they're here to stay. There's no doubt about it. And I think that stable coin regulation is most likely the first one to get passed in 2025.
Yeah, with Jcoin and Eurocoin sort of moving up, and now I've heard talks of a CAD, Canadian version as well, and LATAM, and so we're starting to see these come across in different countries being accepted, and we're just like we're sitting here in the U.S. and we're like, I thought we were supposed to be the forefront.
Oh no, the U.S. has lost its way 100%, and I don't know why. And I think, quite honestly, Elizabeth Warren just recently came out in support of a central bank digital currency in the United States. To me, that's where the huge fight's going to be. She even said that a CBDC in the United States, issued by the United States government, eliminates the need for Bitcoin. Like that literally came out of the woman's mouth, right? And so And I think we're going to see states like Florida, where DeSantis has said that, they won't allow a central bank digital currency in Florida. And we're going to see other states, Wyoming and Florida, Texas, most likely, and others say, object to a U.S. CBDC. And so I think that's going to be a huge fight moving forward.
And just recently, about a week and a half ago, there was a North American Blockchain Expo in Fort Worth, Texas, and Vivek Ramaswamy was there, and he he put out his 3 prongs of crypto, his crypto policy and number 1 is the no code violations, that the creators of code aren't creating any crimes. It's those that might be using malicious actors,
right?
That are still criminals, but building things isn't. And that was one of the things that we've seen a lot of argument with, like those against that built Tornado Cash,
right?
Well,
the thing about it, and it's why it's good to have people, like you out there, is that we have people who believe in the industry and the ecosystem. Their biggest challenge in many ways for mass adoption is education of the general public. Because I can tell you, when you go to when you go down to like the state legislature level, how new we are, or how soon we are, and how early we are in adoption really hits you at home. Because I've testified at a couple state legislature issues on crypto. And these state regulators, if you will, when they have a hearing, they literally ask questions that you and I knew are like, we would call them 2013 questions, right? They'll literally be like, well, Mr. Degen, from what I understand, Bitcoin is primarily used by terrorists and is used by illicit activities. And you have to really educate them to be like, listen, this is a publicly ledger. You'd have to be a moron to like do all your illicit activity on chain. You'll get caught. And then you have to remind them that the US government is the 4th largest Bitcoin holder in the world because of the confiscation that they've been able to seize people's Bitcoin by tracking them down. And so, but my point being is that when you get outside of crypto Twitter and crypto YouTube and you go to the general population, they're just starting to grasp what you were doing in 2012. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And like, I think in reality, it was the $10,000 bill that was used most by criminals and terrorist payoffs. And then the $100 bill is the cartel's favorite form of currency. And I think, what is it, like 95% of all $100 bills test positive for cocaine?
Yep. Absolutely. But we have to disabuse people. And when you have Gary Gensler and Elizabeth Warren and people of that, public stature still saying, these lies that is predominantly used for terrorism or the cartel, it's just not true. But, they have an agenda. And so they're never going to let truth get in the way of what they want, the story they want to paint. But it does strike me because, we're in this crypto world but when you get outside of it, it's just shocking of how unaware people are and the perception that they still have. And then when you have the FTXs and the Sam Bankman-Frieds of the world and the Celsius and the BlockFis and the Voyagers and the bankruptcies, it does give the industry a black eye. And so,
I got, you brought up FTX, which is funny because I wanted to bring them up earlier when you were talking about paid marketers. I spent 5 weeks in New York, going to the SBF trial every day, sitting in the courtroom. I got to meet all of like the reporters and stuff that had been covering this from the get-go. And one, I was sort of laughing at how much the prosecution fumbled blockchain stuff.
Yeah.
And how and here's a name you might recognize when I get to it, but and also how much the defense fumbled it as well. But the prosecution used Dr. Easton for their financial piece, and when he read off his 40 years of financial analytics and deep dive and of financial investigations, they asked him like, oh, I've been part of Enron case filing and these other big Web 2 cases, and they're like, what is your blockchain? He's like, oh, SEC versus Ripple. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be so like right off the get-go, there was two things that he did really funny. That he did a great job of tracking funds to a point, of following where consumer funds were used to pay off politicians, were paid to pay celebrity endorsements. But initially he had like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and like US stable dollar and USDT, their images, but he had the Ethereum Classic logo instead. And then when he was talking about the payoff FTX made to Binance to buy back its shares, he said BUSD and BNB. He was like, BNB is a Binance chain, and then BUSD is Bitcoin stable dollar. And I'm like, just even the security, like these financial experts are off. But when FTX, I saw there was just so much there that they could have done good at one point too.
Yeah.
But they like doubled down, and that sucks. Because like you said, these exchanges that started in 2014 to 2016, they were just doing what they could at the time, and they've come a long way since then to do good now. Do you think that there's going to be a moment, like we just saw with CZ and the SEC, the DOJ and the CFTC and the DOJ sort of I felt like it almost wiped CZ's slate clean in a way.
Well, I mean, I was a little interested in the fact that the DOJ, is objecting to CZ going to his home in the UAE prior to his sentencing because they considered him a flight risk. That actually surprised me because of his deal, and he showed up in Seattle voluntarily, and it shows me that they do want a pound of flesh more than I thought, and so they're probably going to ask certainly for 18 months now, which is that's the maximum guideline. The judge can go above it or go under it, but I won't be surprised now to see the SEC ask for 18 months to 2 years of prison time for CZ. And the reality is, when you say wipe the slate clean, is that 3 years from now, even if he serves prison time, CZ can come back and be CEO of Binance. And I think that if everyone is objective, and this is the problem with the industry, not a lot of people are objective. I think objectively speaking, it's fair to say that CZ, when you look at the evidence of Binance, that they did make a decision that they wanted to grow. And by growing, they had lackadaisical AML, anti-money laundering issues and whatnot. And you fast forward, they're the number one exchange in the world, and they got to pay $4 billion. CZ's estimated to be worth somewhere between 10 and 12 billion. Personally, he pays a $50 million fine. I mean, that's like a $100 ticket to a regular person. And so there's a lot to be said that what you're saying is that they're sort of wiped clean. I mean, listen, here's the thing that I realized when Larry Finks of the world come in and they're demanding a Bitcoin spot ETF, and Larry Fink's getting up there and and they're asking for an ETH spot ETF, and they're talking about crypto being a flight to quality. I think that's probably the biggest sign that crypto, to a certain extent, is here to stay. You know, which chains ultimately will be most successful, I don't know, but I think that that says a lot. And I think that what we're seeing is the incumbents, like the Larry Finks of the world, relying on the regulators to hurt crypto, hurt the prices, and then come in and get more of the infrastructure. I mean, is it a surprise that the two largest shareholders in Coinbase are BlackRock and Vanguard?
Yeah.
I mean, is that a shock? I won't be shocked if BlackRock buys a bigger piece of Coinbase. You know what I mean? They're using,
or they already own it through some sort of one of their shells.
Yes, they have
Yeah.
like 7 to 8%, and
Yeah.
so that says a lot. And so I think we're seeing the incumbents are, you know, coming in and getting a bigger piece of the pie, and at some point the SEC will come to the table. You know, the question is, will it take a big decision from an appellate court, to like the Grayscale one, but also like related to Coinbase or Kraken, or will they come to the table because the Larry Finks of the world tell Gary Gensler it's time to come to the table?
Yeah. Or, you know, or an administration change, you know?
Right. No, I mean, there's no doubt. And I'm someone who doesn't, you know, I think there's a really good chance that we don't even know who the two nominees are yet.
Yeah.
Everyone assumes it's Biden and Trump, but I'm not so sure.
Yeah. I'm not sure yet on the Republican side yet. You know, I think there's there's a couple different runners. And then you have the black sheep of the family. You have RFK, you have Bobby Kennedy running as well.
Yeah. And I think people are looking at Bitcoin and crypto coming a long way. I mean, yeah, Vivek, who's come out with his own crypto agenda platform. You have RFK Jr., pro Bitcoin, other candidates pro Bitcoin. And so you have DeSantis, who's anti CBDC, which is a way of being pro Bitcoin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so this will be the first time where crypto and Bitcoin get asked on at the presidential debates, no doubt.
Yeah, and that will be it's an interesting play, especially Trump's had, you know, the NFT piece too, where people were able to get access to Trump via that NFT thing that he had, and it brought so many. I laugh at it, but it brought so many people that weren't part of blockchain into blockchain.
Sure.
And put it on people's on in their agenda and on their plate as a real thing. And so
I mean, you had a Let's Go Brandon coin.
Yes, there. Oh my God, there is. You basically. I don't know if you saw this, but last year, I think it was either last year or the beginning of this year, Vitalik had made a tweet saying there should be a the coin. So anytime anyone uses the word the project can say, look, so and so's talking about us. The next day, someone went and pushed that out, and he literally then he like apologized. He's like, I'm sorry this happened. And I'm like, this is why we can't have nice things. But yeah, it's interesting. Every experience can become tokenized.
Hey, let me ask you a question, because you were at the SBF trial. I just read something and I tweeted about it, and it's shocking to me. But Michael Lewis, you know who that is, right?
Yep. Yeah.
He wrote that fiction about SBF. He said that the gallery, people like you who were in the courtroom watching, was akin to seeing a lynching. And that just blows my mind, right? Like, it almost makes me think this guy is still being paid by his parents or something. Like, why would he go so hard to paint SBF as a victim? Like, it just, and to make that kind of analogy to lynching of, oh my God, it's just
sensationalism journalism. So so I was only in the gallery / overflow courtrooms 3 times. And that's because like I got my first time in court, I actually got kicked out halfway through the day because I had brought my watch didn't get taken from me, and so I was might or may not have been recording
right,
Caroline Ellison, but
right,
and they're like, hey, just come back tomorrow, and so I spent, and then the overflows were a little bit more lackadaisy. People could talk to each other and ask questions. It wasn't everyone's laughed when there was a fumble, no matter if you were in the main courtroom or not. Kaplan kept a really strict courtroom. um I would say it wasn't like a lynching in any way, shape, or form. Especially, I got to sort of there for so long. I got to meet Joe and Barb and talk to them, here and there. My hardest part was when after Sam got sentenced and found guilty, or not sentenced, but found guilty. Joe and Barb moved over to his side of the courtroom to stand behind him.
yeah,
Every reporter was like, it was like a circle wave out of them, pen ready to just write down this any interaction. And I had been writing every note that I could, and at that moment I was like, yeah, no. And I put my pen and paper away just because to give the parent. And so it was more the, people surrounding a train fire, and it was almost, you're like, yes, he did wrong, and he was found guilty by a jury of his peers. Um, and so not a single person, I didn't see a single hand a cheer being raised on behalf of FTX customers. It was more like F that guy. So Michael Lewis's piece, I think was wrong in that aspect, because I got to meet a lot of the reporters and I got to learn their human side of things. And it's how much they don't even understand a blockchain, and how like much of a circus that this got made into, but then how much they added to it in a way.
mm-hmm.
By thinking like you said, why would you buy this digital thing, and it's your fault for it going down, you're an idiot. Well, when's the last time a bank actually physically transferred money? Everything's digital, can be wiped out like that. At least with blockchain, I have instant settlement and I know it's there, and no one's playing around with my money in between that settlement. And so it was a hard take to read, because um I was happy that he was found guilty, um for the simple fact is, like, I'm like, cool, this chapter can close. Now let's go to sentencing, where I'm really interested in is um in his next trial that happens in March, on the political donations and on the security side of things. But I think people are cheering for the wrong reason, and they're making a show out of this, like, in the wrong way. It was blockchain that showed where the fraud was happening,
Right,
you know?
right.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, listen, you were there. You're probably a much nicer guy than me, because I'm someone who I'm really not gonna have any sympathy I know Sam's a human being and all of that, but you know, what people need to hear are the victim impacts, right? You need to hear about the grandma who listened to her grandson who put her life savings of $200,000 on FTX because her grandson was so passionate. And he could even be an employee of FTX and he put his life savings on it. And he got screwed and the grandma got screwed. And all of a sudden now she's relying on an inadequate social security check to get by, and her entire life savings has been wiped out. And so, you know, when anyone starts going down the sympathy road, I always try to redirect them to that is the story. You know what I mean?
I agree with you 100%.
That's the story.
Yeah.
And hopefully the prosecution, when it comes to sentencing evidence, puts on true victim impact testimony, you know, and puts faces to the $8 billion and puts faces to the customers. And because, you know, there were people that got wiped out, you know, now maybe they'll get some money back, hopefully, but we'll see.
Yeah, we're seeing some movements from the FTX estate, but also what the FTX estate is doing to stabilize fears as well.
Right.
Hearing, I don't want to call them victims, but those that were stolen from, you know, because putting trust in a financial institution or what you thought was a financial institution, you shouldn't be victimized. You're not a victim of, you know, they went as legitimate, hardcore as they could. Now, if we're asking, well, AT&T Stadium, because they're doing marketing, should I not trust AT&T? They had Miami Heat. What I disliked was, like you said, the moms, the dads, the sons that put their money on FTX. They were sort of pushed to the side. Instead, it was, oh yeah, we put $60 million fund in there. Right. What I saw in the thousands of spreadsheets that they bored everyone with at times, you know, teacher pension funds, you know, those were the people that should be heard from, not the guy that, you know, that, oh yeah, no, I wrote it off as a tax write-off, you know.
Right.
And you know, I agree with you though on that.
Yeah, it was it's funny when I was talking to some attorneys, and I represent the XRP holders. I'd get real sensitive to this subject because someone would say, "Oh, well, you know, you represent a lot of XRP holders. Maybe you could highlight, you know, who lost the most money." And I'm like, "Well, wait a minute. That's not the way you look at it. Someone may have lost $2 million when the SEC sued Ripple and did what they did, but they might be worth 10 million. It's the guy who maybe lost 25 grand. That was his entire life savings. That is a better approach. So it's not always what you're getting. It's not always about who lost the most money, but it's you know what I mean. Someone losing 25 grand could be much more harmful to their life than someone who loses 100 grand.
Heck, you know, even drop a couple zeros. The guy that lost $200.
Yeah, know? I mean, listen, I know there were accounts like when XRP was frozen by I Trust Capital. You had people who had their entire life savings. Now, whether they should have their entire life savings is a different question, right? Mm-hmm. But they chose, and they may have had $200,000 of their 401k moved into an I Trust XRP account, and now that's frozen, and we got to wait to an outcome of a court case or to whether or not that's going to be unfrozen. That's just insane, right? That government action could cause that kind of trauma to people.
I think so. Where the thing that got me upset was how off Nishad Singh, Caroline Ellison, Cam Sung got off. you know, like the people that were like I was listening to Nishad's testimony, and he kept talking about how he was making exercises on how to take more customer funds and how to do like these experiments and how to use the and but then he was like, oh, but I never did that because I felt it was. I'm like, well, if you thought it was wrong, why would you keep doing it?
Right.
You knew it was wrong after it all came out. Why did you close? Why did you take $3.1 million as to buy a house?
Right.
You know, days before, you know, and so what made me mad was that not enough people were brought to accountability for it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the sentence that they have to serve in their guilty pleas. You know what I mean? I'm imagining that that they're going to have to do several years at least.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm
we'll
well.
see.
You know, I think Nishad Nishad, he was like when he was asked by the defense, what by Cohen, what was he hoping to expect for his testimony? He laid out that he was under the impression he wasn't going to be getting any jail time.
Well, I think he might be mistaken about that. We'll see.
I hope so. And you know, I guess, yeah, my heart comes out a little bit, but also I because I've been, but then I can, you know, I got teeth in me still, you know. I got teeth in me. So, man, I want to go to a couple. There's a couple questions that people might have in a minute, but you're doing so many different things right now. One of the things I wanted to ask you, when you first started, why did you take it upon yourself to be part of the XRP on behalf of the XRP? What was it? You're like, I can do this. That's easy.
Well, you know, it's a great question. It was New Year's. It was Christmas Eve, and as I said, I had a decent investment in XRP, but it was small compared to Bitcoin, and even like I said, ETH was much more. And I read the complaint against Ripple, and the very first paragraph said, you know, digital asset security XRP. And I was like, man, they're actually calling the token a security. That's fucked up. Like that was my initial thought. And I said, all right, I got to read this whole thing. And then I read it, and I just my jaw dropped, and I was shocked because they even went into the future, and their argument was that XRP was, is, and always will be a security. And they even had a paragraph in the complaint that said, that went into the future and said, if one day a foreign country deems XRP currency, it will still be a security, like, because it will be only because of Ripple's efforts. That was literally a paragraph. And I'm like, oh my God, I've never seen a complaint this overbroad. And then they had like fraud-like language used to like make Brad Gardenhouse look bad, and Chris Larson and Ripple, but it was a non-fraud complaint. And I'm like, okay, they're doing that intentionally to like divert people's attention because people get caught up in the noise, right? And a lot of lawyers were talking about, oh, look at this language, look at this language. I was like, it's not fraud. They didn't allege fraud. And so I just sat there and I said, wow, man, the Coinbase is going to delist X. I mean, I was surprised Uphold didn't. I predicted that every exchange was going to delist XRP. No one wants to go against the SEC. And I knew people were going to get wiped out. And I just sat there and said, you know, I could sit here and bitch about it and complain, or I could do something about it. I got a law degree. I'm not worried about the SEC. You know, if you knew if the shit I've been through in my life, I don't care what they're
SEC's the last thing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they're not going to intimidate me. They can say anything they want to get about me. It's not going to bother me at all. And so, fuck it. I'm just gonna, you know, my daughter got on her 18th birthday. She got 15 grand. That was, you know, money that for birthdays and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I said to her, listen, do what you want with it. You know, hopefully you make a smart decision. Hopefully your dad is like, you know, told you not to just go buy clothes and shit, right? And she went on her own and she's like, man, my dad keeps talking about this fourth industrial revolution, Bitcoin, right? She didn't know Ripple. What she did is she bought Bitcoin 9,500, bought a whole Bitcoin. And then she took the other money and she bought half ETH and half XRP. All she did was said, I don't know these tokens, but I'm going to buy the top three.
Yeah.
And she spent most of it on Bitcoin and she put away. And so she was an example. I'm like, here's my daughter. Like, she never heard of Ripple. She doesn't know who Brad Garlinghouse is. And she's not in an account. And it just got me like irritated. And I just said, you know, I either sit around and bitch and moan about it or I try to do something about it. Now, I never knew that it would inspire 75,000 other people to join and say, yeah, I'm with you, John. Let's do this, you know, which became a very uplifting thing for me. And so that's really, you know, the honest answer about why I did what I did.
Yeah.
And it's been great because, like I said, the community, you know, I think that because I did it, obviously I didn't take any money and I did it pro bono. I think people were just inspired by like, hey, somebody wanted to do the right thing, was in a position to do it and isn't asking for money for it. And I think that helped, you know, cause other people to join. And so it's really been an organic, beautiful thing that I'm very proud of.
Yeah. Was there any time during it to where you were like, obviously it's one of those things, once you start, you can't stop, but you were like, I think I bit off more than I could chew.
Oh yeah, I'd be lying to you. Actually, I write about this in a book that I put out. It's really not about the case, but I talk about it in one of the last chapters. But yeah, there was a time, you know, because I'm a small firm and I have to work on my cases that pay the employees and pay the rent and all of that. And I'm a small firm. I just have one associate and 4 paralegals. And so I'm quite busy. And there were times when I was like, shit, like, what am I like? I got to go against the U.S. government, and they got unlimited resources. So there were times when I thought that, you know, I'm going to get my ass kicked. So, but whatever. And there were a lot of people on social media when I first sued the SEC that said I was a moron and who's this guy think he is. And there were even some XRP holders in the beginning. They were like, hey, just let Ripple handle it. You're going to fuck it up. which I understood. I never took it personal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that there weren't times that it wasn't stressful. I'm not a great writer, in my opinion, a legal writer.
Mm-hmm.
And so research isn't my thing. Like, I'm more of a jury attorney, like in front of a jury, everyday guy talking about like the facts. That's my strength. Appellate briefs, appellate arguments, researching case law. It's just not my strength. So it probably took me a lot longer than it would take someone who is better at that. So there were some long nights to get the amicus brief done and stuff like that. But in the end, it was great, man, because I got to tell you, when the judge issued her decision and the 2 things I did, which were the XRP holders and the affidavits, and then representing Naomi Brockwell in the library case, when both those things appear in her decision, it was great validation because it showed you that you can make a difference if you're willing to put yourself out there. And I think it spoke volumes for the judge that thousands of people came together and said, you know, we don't want the SEC speaking for us. This is how we feel. And she heard their voices. And so that was very validating.
Yeah. No, and I think that is a validation. Not only that, but you're like, we did right, you know,
Yeah.
and yeah. And I think that sort of embodied, like, I got to hear one of your interview pieces real briefly on your brass knuckles, and I was like, I get that. And that was how we met. Like, when I saw you outside Missouri Mainnet, I didn't know who you were. I didn't, well, I know John Deaton, but I didn't know it was you. I actually went up to you because I loved your suit. That is why, your blue suit. And then I saw the brass knuckles. I was like, I recognize that. Saw you. I was like, okay, not a fanboy moment. Don't fan out here.
Oh,
Yeah.
you were very kind, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. And so, you know, you didn't even look at the fact of like wanting to get denied by anyone. So you made brass knuckle media, right? Or brass knuckle books.
Yeah, I had a publisher that I was working with, and they were just giving me the runaround. And the beauty about this community, the XRP community, I just said, you know what, maybe I don't know what to do with the cover and all that kind of stuff. And so I put a tweet out, and lo and behold, there was an XRP holder who had been with me from the beginning. I'd never met him. He DM'd me. His name's Alex, and he had been doing book covers and other things with books for over 15 years for like Penguin, Random House. Very talented guy. And he was like, John, let me, I want to do your cover. And I said, sure. And then when I was getting a runaround with the other publishing company, I just reached out to him and said, man, let's just, I need him to do it. He's the talent, right? I said, how about you just take the lead of this and we start Brass Knuckle Books? And very proud of it. Still I always wear it. Here's my brass knuckles right here.
All right.
And in my book, I talk about, using brass knuckles when I was a kid to overcome a bully that was beating my ass every day when I was 10 years old. And so, and he agreed, and we put it out. And the whole goal of Brass Knuckle Books is for other independent authors to help them, give them good service, quality, walk them through the process of getting published. There's people out there who don't have the means necessarily, but they may have a great idea, great concept. It could be anything from a cookbook to, a mom who has a vision of a children's book. And so I'm hoping that Brass Knuckle Books will be able to help others.
So you're expanding it just beyond you. Okay. That
I did not. I mean, obviously my book was the first one, but
proof case.
The goal is to help other independent authors who, because in my book, I spoke to a couple companies, and my book is very raw. I don't hold back. It's all true. And there's violence, there's drug addiction, there's sex, poverty, abuse, there's language, racial language. I grew up in the inner city of Detroit, and I just tell the truth of what it was like. And so there were people like, well, we might want you to not use that language. I go, it's the truth, though. What do you want me not tell the truth? And so I was running into a little bit of that. And so I said, listen, I'm not going to let my voice be chilled. If people read the book, I'm not going to hold back and try to make it politically correct. It is what it is. So that's why I said, fuck it, we'll do it myself. And when I say myself, I couldn't have done it without Alex. Like, he's the talent. You know what I mean?
So here's the Degen question. Have you put your book on chain?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not. I'm not the tech guy. Whenever I have a tech question, I call Jay from Spin the Bits.
Okay.
But that's a great idea.
Right.
I'll have to look into it.
Yeah. There's just, you've done so much. And you have Kraken upcoming, and are you becoming the crypto attorney now?
Well, I don't listen. You know, it's funny that a lot of people, when I first filed the case against the SEC, I went on a podcast. It was about 2 weeks after I filed it, and they asked me a question, and they said, "So, John, how long have you been a securities attorney?" And I looked at my watch, and I said, "About 2 weeks now." So I'm obviously getting involved in crypto, and I talk to companies and behind the scenes and whatnot. I believe in the ecosystem,
Mhm.
uh, and uh, and obviously I started crypto law, and I'm pushing for smart, tailored regulations in the United States, and so I believe I'll be involved in it. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm the crypto lawyer, but I'm one of, there's some very talented people, man. I got to tell you, one thing I'm very impressed by is the quality of lawyers that are out there in this ecosystem, much more talented than me in many ways. Some of them are even coders, like they know how to code, and that always impresses me. So uh, shout out to all of those very talented crypto lawyers out there.
Yeah.
Because they're quite impressive.
You know, you brought up crypto law. I remember I followed you for a long time, and then it wasn't until you got sim swapped
Oh,
that
yeah.
I actually started following your daughter and crypto law and stuff like that. What was
Yeah,
that?
that's some scary stuff. You know, I not only did I get SIM swap, but my home Wi-Fi got hijacked.
Yeah,
They got into my work email. Very very nation state level type of sophistication. And I had to hire people to come in and basically burn down my infrastructure and rebuild it to make sure that there were no problems. But yeah, my phone, my Twitter got hijacked. I was locked out on my Twitter account,
a
and
drain link was put up on your Twitter as well.
yeah, all of that. You know, like and immediately the first thing I did, as soon as my phone, I realized my phone, in addition to my Twitter, my phone was swapped, and you know, I rushed to my bank accounts and Coinbase or whatever other account, freeze, you know,
Yeah.
because they were certainly after crypto. And so people out there watching, it's very, very sophisticated to the point where at my house, I went on my account, an exchange account, and on my phone, it was frozen. I could not access this account. And I'll tell you, it was an Uphold account.
Hmm.
And I went on my laptop. And then when I punched in my password and whatnot, it said account frozen. Like it popped up on my screen, and a link came up that said, you know, hit this link, which I did because it was from support. It had the title of the exchange and support. It was very
Hmm.
official looking, the logo. And then it asked me to enter like passwords and stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
shit, like I did this.
Yeah.
And I stopped what I was doing because I got nervous. And then the phone rang. This is
Hmm.
before they swapped it.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, we're from support, blah, 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 blah. And we'll walk you through. Did you get the link? We'll walk you through.
Yeah.
And I said to them, how do I know this is legit? And they're like, we're never going to ask you for your password. Just punch it in on the computer. They were on my Wi-Fi, though, watching me.
Yeah.
And so I just said, I don't have my laptop. Call me back in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And that hesitation that the guy had, I knew that something was up. I got off my Wi-Fi and I could log into my accounts fine.
Yeah.
And so what they had done is hijacked my home Wi-Fi.
So that
And
means like they came either
it,
nearby or it was a targeted piece, you know, and like,
I mean, I have pissed off a few cryptographers out there.
yeah, yeah, you know,
Right.
I like, so a lot of people like, okay, one of the things where they were make people like where reporters were making sort of a circus of the SBF trial you know, it was like they took, instead of the seriousness of it, I got interviewed by the New York Times, and they sort of did a piece and on why I was there, and I think that I thought it was really good. The only thing that some people had flack with was that when they had asked me for my real name, you know, someone had thrown out a like, oh, does the government think you're dead? And I sarcastically responded back, yeah, the government thinks I'm dead, you know. And so they ran with that, and so I then took that. When that was published, I was like, oh my god, that's going to be my new Twitter header. Government thinks I dead, you know, DED. And I'm like, no, I pay taxes 4 away from Sunday, but I used to go, I went after a couple bad guys. I've done that a few times, and not even on that aspect of it, but like the privacy side of it, you know, that and consistency side, but knowing that people target, and I've seen, you know, we've seen prominent people be swatted, you know, and, you know, SIM swapped and stuff like that. And how many times I've actually been like on one of my alt accounts on Telegram, I was reached out by someone who said that they were me, you know,
Yes,
and it's just,
they're very sophisticated. Everybody just needs to know is, you know, don't share your, don't hit links that you don't know. Don't share your password. Um, and
yeah,
if you have any suspicion, freeze your accounts. If you have, you know, an account on exchange or whatnot, and it may be a pain in the ass getting it unlocked because you got to prove who you are and all that, but it's worth it.
yeah, 2FA the heck out of that stuff.
Absolutely. You know, I didn't even the Twitter account, I didn't have it 2FA'd. And that was one of the reasons why I was easily hacked. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And once they get your SIM card, you know, just think of everything we do on our phone. Your banking, you get that code to enter
yep,
your
everything's
banks.
text messaged.
Everything's text message, SSM code, and all that. So we rely on that cell phone so much that you got to be careful.
Yeah, no, definitely. Um, man, I want to wrap this up, but I also want to just keep talking to you forever.
Well, I'll come back sometime soon.
Yeah, you know, you've done great talks. You know, you get the other pillars in this community like Caitlin Long, you know, Ryan Selkis, you know, the Bobby Lee, like the Bitcoin pillars and stuff like that. You know, Nick Spanos, and you're sort of putting yourself in that category as well. Um, and now you have a book out, Food Stamp Warrior, and you know you're putting yourself out there. I think you said it before we hopped on the air. You're like, I basically got rid of any way someone could blackmail me.
No, if anyone reads my book, they'll know what I'm talking about. I admit to some the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know what I mean? I kind of put it out there. It was and it's very raw, very honest. And I think people appreciate the honesty.
Yeah,
Um, there's some people that think I'm crazy for admitting some of the stuff that I admit to, but listen, we're all flawed, man. You know, and we're all susceptible to certain things. You know, like I got injured in the Marine Corps, and so in December of 2000, my surgeon came to me and said, "Listen, there's this new drug, John. It's not addictive. It's called OxyContin." And they put me on like this powerful drug, and then and then all of a sudden you start battling those things, right? Because you got a legitimate pain problem with a very severe injury, and they're putting you on that kind of strong pharmaceutical. So I share my battle with kind of on and off, Vicodin or oxys or pain pills, and how easy that can transition from a legitimate purpose to, then you experience my mom was dying, certain bad things that happened in life. Then all of a sudden you start taking it for other reasons because you want to feel numb to the world, and you start self-medicating because you don't want to maybe experience certain pain that you're facing at that time. And so it's just, I share those types of things. My sister had a heroin addiction most of her life. It got to the point where she OD'd a couple times. I'm a federal prosecutor. My mom's begging me to do something about it. So I sliced my arm several places with a steak knife, and I tell the police that that she cut me. I would never testify against her for something she did, but I knew it would get her locked up for about 6 weeks for the arraignment. And then I refused to cooperate, and they let her out. But she dried up, you know what I mean? And people were like, "Oh my God, how could you admit to mutilating your own arm?" I was like, "Listen, it was life or death situation for my sister, and I felt that I had to do something." And so I did it. But stuff like that is that.
Yeah.
So yeah, all the things that I wouldn't necessarily say all, but a lot of the things that that people wouldn't admit to, I just put it out there. Like, you know, it was a form of therapy for me. And so experienced some bad stuff as a kid. So you hold that stuff in for 40 years, and then it's very therapeutic to say, fuck it, you know, instead of holding it in for 40 years, let me just tell the world what happened.
Yeah. And the audiobook version, it's you reading it, right?
Yep. Yeah. I underestimated how many people rely on audio, and it's went well, but I couldn't let anyone else tell that story. There are times in it where, you know, I get emotional talking about certain things. The death of my best friend who was shot in a drive-by in Detroit, stuff like that when I was 17. That was a tough chapter to read. But it's life, man. You know, life's hard sometimes, and I figure that, you know, people can look at me and say, "Oh, wow, there's a successful attorney. You know, he's got some money in the bank." That doesn't necessarily mean that everything's great. You know what I mean? That I still battle what regular people battle too.
Yeah. No, that's people forget that behind crypto that this is just what we found the technology piece on that we're on the forefront of, you know?
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely, man.
yeah. I want to thank you so much for your time. As I have everyone that comes on, you know, we end the show in two different ways, with two different things. Final thoughts and words of wisdom. And then I have the best, worst knock knock joke on the face of the planet.
Okay.
So final thoughts and words of wisdom, John.
Listen, I would tell people that try their best not to sweat the small things. You know what I mean? Because life's going to give you some big things to worry about, and also try your best to realize that people are going through shit that you'll never imagine, and maybe try to be a little less judgmental, you know what I mean, about people, whether it's someone who's homeless, you don't know what their story is, whether it's someone who's addicted to pills or drugs, you don't know what made them get to that point. You know what I mean? If someone loses all their money on leverage or whatever because they made a bad decision, it doesn't mean they deserve it. You know what I mean? Maybe just be a little more kind to people. That's all. Because I think we're living in such a divisive world. It's really discouraging and demoralizing that, you know, we could sit down, and I guarantee you, you and I don't know each other that well, but I guarantee you we got so much more in common, right? We could laugh at each other about our investments, or you could be like, "I can't believe you got that shit coin, John," or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I guarantee you that we have more in common than we have not in common. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter who you vote for or who I vote for. It doesn't matter what your religion is or my religion. You know what I mean? But I just like to see people be a little bit more kind.
Yeah. Be more kind.
Yeah.
It's a good way to end it. As I've ended 465 episodes so far, my words of wisdom are always the same. A closed mouth cannot be fed, and you cannot feed a closed mouth, meaning if no one knows you're looking for opportunity, opportunity can never come a knocking. And if opportunity does come a knocking and no one answers, it's going to keep on walking. John, I want to thank you for an amazing time. This knock knock joke throws a lot of people off, but it comes out of love, as we've done it for 465 episodes. It comes from those before us and those that are going to come after us. But knock knock.
Who's there?